Welcome to Municipal Affairs. I'm Christopher Brown. Today, we are taking you to the heart of downtown Calgary, where this past weekend, a significant and milestone event unfolded at this year's Federation of Canadian Municipalities convention. The convention, a pivotal gathering for municipal leaders from across the nation, had a keynote address by none other than Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. As hundreds of municipal leaders gathered in the bustling conference halls of the Telus Convention Centre, anticipation was palpable when it was announced that Trudeau was not only going to speak, but would take questions from the audience in a live, unscripted Q&A session. Trudeau took the stage to discuss pressing issues, shared his vision for Canada's future, and reinforced the critical bond between the federal government and municipalities. The interactive segment provided a unique platform for local leaders to voice their concerns, seek clarity on federal policies, and press the Prime Ministers on matters important to their communities. Here is that entire appearance of Prime Minister Trudeau in its entirety.
Hello, FCM. It is always a pleasure to join you here every year. Thank you for the warm introduction, Catherine. Scott et Carole, merci pour l'invitation encore une fois et pour le travail essentiel que vous faites au nom de plus de 2000 municipalités canadiennes d'un océan à l'autre. Scott, I want to thank you for your leadership, and Jeff, congratulations and welcome. I'm looking forward to working with you. I also want to congratulate the incoming chair of the Big City Mayors Caucus, Josh Morgan, and say thank you to two old friends, Mike Savage and Charlie Clark, who are here attending their last FCM conference. Let's give them a huge round of applause for their years of service. Now, the first time I addressed this conference was 11 years ago. Now, much has changed since 2013, but there's a reason I keep coming back every single year. It's because I know that thousands of municipal leaders across Canada are on the front lines of delivering for Canadians day in and day out. Our government recognizes that, and we'll keep working with you to be there as partners. Over the years, we've accomplished a lot together. We've invested in projects like the REM in Montreal, in a new indoor aquatic facility in Regina, and in active transportation infrastructure in Courtenay, British Columbia, to name very few examples. On a aussi financé le Fonds municipal vert de la FCM, qui a lancé ce lundi une nouvelle initiative de 530 millions de dollars pour aider les municipalités à s'adapter aux conséquences des changements climatiques. And here in Calgary, we stepped up years ago with funding for the Green Line LRT project, and just this week, the BMO Centre expansion opened with the financial support of our government. But as you all well know, there's so much more work to be done on homelessness, climate change, pour l'infrastructure, pour le transport en commun. We are building a stronger future for Canadians, but as you know, that only works if we do it together. And nowhere is that truer than on housing. For too many Canadians, buying a home or finding an affordable place to rent is out of reach. That's why we took action and launched the most ambitious housing plan in Canadian history, a plan that'll unlock almost 4 million homes in less than a decade. And a key component of this plan is the Housing Accelerator Fund. In September of last year, we signed our first agreement with Josh Morgan in London, Ontario, and just 9 months later, we have reached 179 agreements with municipalities across Canada, including one of those covering the whole province of Quebec. Halifax, for example, enacted some of the most ambitious zoning reforms in the country, up to 8 units per lot in most of the downtown core and 7 to 9-story buildings on key transit routes and around Halifax's universities. That's the kind of ambition that solves this housing crisis. Les changements qu'on est en train de faire pour réduire les délais et la paperasse vont nous permettre d'accélérer la construction de centaines de milliers de nouveaux logements. Together, the Housing Accelerator Fund will fast-track more than 750,000 homes over the next decade, from St. John's to Regina, from Toronto to Victoria. And my friends, while my conservative opponent wants to rip up agreements with your communities that get homes built, while he chooses to denigrate some of the most ambitious and progressive mayors in the country by calling them incompetent, we've chosen a different path. Partnership, not punitive measures, is what's needed to make a positive difference in the lives of Canadians. Ce qu'on a fait avec des villes comme Moncton et d'autres partout au pays nous montre à quoi ressemble un vrai partenariat et un vrai progrès. Ensemble. C'est comme ça qu'on va s'attaquer à la crise du logement. And with new measures announced in Budget 2024, we're going even further in supporting municipalities to build more homes. We're investing another $400 million in the Housing Accelerator Fund to sign on with even more ambitious cities and towns. We're providing over $1 billion to expand our Reaching Home program to address local homelessness challenges. And we're launching the $6 billion Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund, a program that will build and upgrade critical housing infrastructure like sewage and water purification to support your community's growth. Now, let's say it out loud. There are conservative premiers out there who don't like these critical federal investments. They don't like them because they want to cut off the relationship between municipalities and the federal government. They want to prevent you from taking bold action. They want to sit on their hands while young Canadians plead to have the same access afforded to every generation that came before them. But let me be clear. Our government is always going to be there for Canadians. And being there for Canadians means being there in full partnership with all of you. My friends, we are living in challenging times. And in challenging times, Canadians need each and every one of you to continue pushing further. Il faut continuer de penser grand et d'être innovateur, de s'engager et d'être à la hauteur des défis et de bâtir des communautés fortes et abordables. Together, we can solve the most pressing issues of our time, and together, we will restore fairness for every generation. Thank you very much. Merci, mes amis. Looking forward to our conversation.
Big crowd. How's everybody doing? Prime Minister, thank you for joining us today. I know you've traveled a long way to make it here to be with us this afternoon, and we appreciate not only your willingness, but it was your idea to come out and take questions from this audience, and I know that we're all appreciative of that and looking forward to it. Now, I'm going to ask the first, how about that? I'm going to ask the first question. So, what do you think of Halifax? Hello, Halifax. Hey, and I've also got to say hi from David Mitchell at Bridgewater. He texted me. So, David, I did my job, brother.
Excellent.
I'm going to ask you one question.
David, I saw a Michelin executive the other day who was very excited about Bridgewater as well. So yeah, we're working on that. It was in France. He was pushing a veteran in a wheelchair. He was there sponsoring or something. And he said, "Oh, we love Nova Scotia." I'm like, "Oh yeah, David's going to love to hear that." So awesome.
There you go. That's awesome. I'm going to ask you a question I've heard you ask twice today already in the two meetings that you took before this. And this is something that we're really focused on at FCM, as you know, and we put out a paper on this week. We love the Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund. It validates what FCM has been saying for a long time, that you can't build housing or support local economies without investing in vital infrastructure. We're all working to grow housing supply, to renew infrastructure, to promote public safety and build more resilient communities in the face of extreme weather. We have limited means, as you know. Property tax is an outdated way of raising revenue, and development charges are not up to the scale of what municipalities need to support and deliver to Canadians. So this question is, do you support the idea of all orders of government working together to develop a new growth framework that would support the quality of life for Canadians? And would you be prepared to help convene a national discussion with all orders of government on this really important topic? Prime Minister.
Excellent. Well, first of all, Mike, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to take questions from people here, because the most important thing, I mean, yes, 11 years ago I showed up, give a big speech, and everyone's like, okay, that's great. It's not just about the speeches. What I've discovered over the past almost dozen years of engaging and working in partnership, not just here at FCM, but with all of you across the country, is it's the conversations, it's the ideas, it's the solutions that you're putting forward, because you are right there on the front lines of supporting Canadians, investing, living in the communities alongside them, and responding to a variety of challenges across the country. The municipal order of government is unbelievably important in building a stronger Canada. So I am so glad to be here to hear from all of you and talk with all of you, as I did through 2 sessions and now a third big public session where there's about 90 people at the mic. So I'm going to try and be very quick in my answers. Yes, I support the idea of a municipal growth framework. There's no question about it. But I've been supporting this idea for 10 years now. We stepped up in 2015 as a federal government to say the federal government needs to get back in the business of investing directly in municipalities. And we did. We not just continued with now the Canada Community Building Fund, the former gas tax transfers up to $2.4 billion a year. But we've invested massively in infrastructure, whether it's public transit or other municipal infrastructures. We're showing up with billions on municipal housing programs. We're stepping up on things like daycare that has a direct impact on you. But we're doing an awful lot of things as we step up. And a lot of what we're trying to do is make sure that the provinces step up as well as we show up. But we've all seen that there are certain provinces that are actually pulling back, saying, oh, if the federal government's stepping up, well, then we don't have to spend as much on municipalities. And what our plan is to be additive, because we know we needed more investment in municipalities. So yes, as a federal government, we will always be there to look for doing more, to try and invest more, to make sure that you're able to deliver the services that Canadians rely on. Because what's the proportions? You deliver 90% of the services on 20% of the revenue or something like that. You need to be able to do more for cities, and the federal government can be there, but we need the provinces to be there as well. I mean, right here in Alberta, the provincial government has decided that no, not only do they not want the federal government to be investing in their municipalities, it should be illegal for the federal government to invest in their municipalities. It's not like they're planning on replacing that lost revenue from the federal government. That'd be an entirely different story. That's going in the wrong direction. So I'm happy to talk with you and to continue fighting for better funding formulas for municipalities. But we have to make sure that the provinces are there at the table. No matter how much we try to work around it, municipalities are creations and a responsibility of the provinces according to our constitution. And I hear the request for this, and we need some more operational funding, we need some more infrastructure. We'll try and help in all sorts of ways we can. But the provinces have to be stepping up more, and that's what we're going to work together on to make sure that the provinces are there, taking on their responsibility for all the growth and all the citizens of their provinces that you directly serve and create every single day.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prime Minister. We're going to open the floor to the Q&A. As with every Q&A, we want to remind you that there's a limit of 90 seconds for the questions. We have, the Prime Minister has extended his time with us to 5:35 Calgary time. So be respectful. We're not going to get to everybody that wants to speak to you, but we're going to get to as many as we possibly can. And reminder, as you know, Prime Minister, this is the order of government where we treat people with respect and openness. And well, I don't need to say that, but we are going to be strict on the time frame. All right, mic number 1. You got the floor.
First out of the gate. Wow, okay. Good afternoon. My name's Mayor Fred Moda from the municipality of Red Lake in northwestern Ontario, and glad you're here this afternoon and accepting the question. My question is, a little preamble first. The municipality of Red Lake is a strong economic resource hub in northwestern Ontario with a population of close to 5,000 people, and we're growing. Our community is expanding with new mining opportunities, and through your budget, the Barons River Bridge project connecting over 12,000 First Nations people to our community. That being said, we have continuously been denied for federal funding for our critical infrastructure needs, which concludes 2 rejections from the GICB program and most recently, the Housing Accelerator Fund. In fact, no community in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or Ontario was approved for the Housing Accelerator funding program under the small, rural, and northern stream, except for one near Thunder Bay and
Marathon, wasn't it? It was Marathon, yeah.
So my question is, when are you and your ministries going to address, help, and support the needs of our small, rural, and northern communities?
Excellent question. We have stepped up with a lot of programs for small municipalities, and that's part of why when we put $4 billion towards the Housing Accelerator Fund, we signed with a lot of smaller communities, but there were many communities that we ran out of money for, which is why in the most recent budget, we added another $400 million, and we're going to be making sure that we're coming and knocking on your door. You know what we're asking of you, to be as ambitious as possible in how you're going to change the way they're building housing in communities, because the Housing Accelerator Fund is all about that. It's about encouraging people to change the way they build housing, to change zoning, to change densification rules, to use public land differently. This is the pressure that we're putting on the entire system across the country. And if you're showing up with ambition, we'll show up with money to sign a deal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Number 2.
Hello. The question is, over the last 10 years, you've added over $1 trillion in debt to our national economy. That comes along with a price tag of approximately $32.3 billion in debt servicing costs per year, which if we divided that money between every municipality in Canada, every single municipality, small and large, would have an additional $9 million. And since we all know that the budget will not balance itself, when are you going to balance the budget?
Excellent. Well, listen, I really appreciate the question because it gives me an opportunity to sort of highlight some of the things about how the Canadian economy is doing. There are the 3 largest AAA-rated economies in the world are the United States, Germany, and Canada. We have a AAA rating because international bond rating agencies look at Canada's economy, look at our fiscal situations of both federal and subnational provincial governments, and say that is on a sustainable track. We have the lowest deficit of any economy in the G7, the largest industrialized economies, and we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio of any country in the G7. So what that means is our economy macroeconomically is doing better than just about anyone else out there, and companies around the world are seeing that because since 2015, we've seen a 60% increase in direct investment in Canada across the country, from Volkswagen to others. But we've also, just last year, we were the 3rd largest country in the world in absolute terms after the US and Brazil for foreign direct investment. So companies from around the world are coming to invest in Canada because they see it as a good investment in the future. Now, I've said all that to say the Canadian economy is in stellar position from a macroeconomic level, but the reality that all of you know is that Canadians are squeezed right now. We're faced with grocery prices that are too high, rents that are too high, mortgage payments that are too high. We're faced with challenges around fuel and heating costs that are really hurting ordinary families. So what we did, I'll talk about the carbon tax a little later if I get a question on that, but right now I'm talking about how we're going to support with affordability. So we made the decision that if the federal government has a really strong fiscal position, which we do, by all independent analysts and experts, what better to do with that strong fiscal position than to invest in the things that Canadians need? So we're delivering dental care to over 100,000 seniors over the past month who've gotten dental care for the first time, many of them in years. We're delivering pharmacare over the coming years to make insulin free in this country and provide prescription contraceptives for free to women across this country. We're stepping up with $10 a day childcare right across the country because that's an economic program and a social program. We're stepping up with child food, student food programs, national food policies for school, going to lift 400,000 kids into better nutritionist spaces. We made the conscious and deliberate decision to say, if the Canadian economy is as strong as it is right now, which it is, we need to put that in service of helping Canadians with the cost of living right now without increasing inflation, and that's why the Bank of Canada was able to just drop the rate on Wednesday, because inflation is coming down and now interest rates are going to come down as well. So that was a choice we made. And in parenthesis, every single one of those programs, dental, pharma, childcare, are things that the Conservative Party chose to vote against because they're worried that inflation was too high. Well, we're dropping inflation and we're being there for Canadians, not with cuts and austerity, and we're going to keep doing that. And on the carbon price, it actually puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadian families. That's a parliamentary budget officer who says that. It's absolutely true.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Microphone number 1.
Good afternoon, Karina Williams, Reeve, Northern Sunrise County. Prime Minister, I would like to know if you have been in person to the Northeast region of Alberta to actually see our oil and gas industry. If so, where and when? Because your misinformation continues, which I am confident would not be the case if you experience the true clean industry for yourself, and that way we would not need the carbon tax. Thank you.
Prime Minister.
I've visited Fort McMurray and the oil sands many times over the years, but I haven't been to that particular region. You're absolutely right. But I do know how important the energy industry is to this country. And I say energy writ large because oil and gas has been a strong driver of the national economy for many, many decades. When Alberta does well, Canada does well. And that's just a basic truth. And that's something that we need to make sure we're continuing. The issue, though, excuse me, ma'am, the issue is that the world is choosing to reduce its carbon emissions right now. Investment is flowing where carbon emissions are being reduced. And we want to make sure that we continue to be part of providing energy solutions to the world. The oil sands were a technological innovation to get energy out of the oil sands. It took technology to figure it out. There's a technological problem we're having right now of reducing carbon emissions around the world because the world is warming at an alarming rate. We need to respond to the challenges of climate change, and quite frankly, we need to make sure that the energy industry in Alberta is not just able to reduce its emissions, but able to innovate so there are more good jobs for Albertan energy workers for decades to come, even as the world becomes less reliant on oil and gas. That is the situation we're facing right now. It's not me who's decided that the world is changing the way we consume energy. That's happening. And if Alberta and Canada are going to be part of that transformation and indeed benefit from continuing to provide energy to the world, we have to continue to invest in transforming and reducing our emissions while we continue to provide energy to the world. And the price on pollution, the carbon tax, is an important part of that. It has been designed so that 8 out of 10 families get more money back every year from that price on pollution than it actually costs them. That's the core math of it, it's a way of driving down our emissions while we prepare for a stronger economy of the future. And I know Albertans want to protect our environment for future generations like all Canadians do, and that's what we're going to continue to do together.
Thank you very much. Number 2.
Thank you very much. It's Dorothy McCabe from the City of Waterloo. Thank you for being here and taking our questions. Really appreciate the opportunity. A couple of things just on going to use my preamble. We need continued investment in higher order transit, but we also, we're a urban municipality, but we need transit, and our property tax system simply can't afford to connect to help our rural communities connect to us, to build the GO train services we need, to build the second stage of our ION. We need federal support for that. But my question is around, I'm glad you mentioned housing and homelessness. We know that communities across Canada are struggling. In 2021, you had, in a health mandate letter, you had indicated that there would be a commitment to ongoing permanent funding through for mental health through the Healthcare Act. And I'm just wondering, we need the support. We know that people who are on our street with lived experience, municipalities are trying to pick up the load. We need support, particularly for people with mental health and addictions. Are you committed to bringing forward that support from 2021? Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for mentioning the need to continue investing in public transit. That's why we're creating a $3 billion ongoing permanent public transit fund, so municipalities large and small can plan for the future over the coming years and decades, which we know matters when you're talking about public transit investments. Around mental health and mental health as healthcare and addiction support, in last year's $200 billion worth of health investments for the provinces over the next 10 years, we made a specific investment in mental health as one of those core priorities. One of the challenges we faced as a government is in 2015, we announced $5 billion for mental health funding. And when we signed deals with the provinces a year or two after that, we flowed $5 billion worth of mental health funding, and we heard from folks on the ground that that didn't get to the mental health programs. It certainly was invested in priority areas for each province across the mental health, across the healthcare system, but didn't necessarily target mental health. So one of the things we did this time when we negotiated health accords with the provinces is we're putting in requirements around data, around rigorous, comparable, transparent data collection that will allow comparison within a province, but also across provinces on outcomes, including for mental health, time of accessing mental health services, the kinds of services people get. It's an investment that we hope, because we can't tie direct strings to healthcare funding because provinces deliver healthcare in different ways across the country, but we can make sure that through proper disaggregated, rigorously collected and compared data, we can share outcomes with Canadians so they can see where that money is going, where those investments are actually making a difference. And those investments will be, we hope, transformative as provinces step up to deliver better mental health care for Canadians right across the country. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Number 1.
Hello, Prime Minister. Thanks for being here. My name is Lindsay Koch. I'm a councillor in the city of Kenora in northwestern Ontario. For decades, the people of Grassy Narrows have dealt with the ongoing impacts of colonialism and poisoning of their water from a paper mill, dumping mercury into the English Wabigoon River system. A flourishing community that lived and thrived off water and fish systems has faced neurological and community poisoning by mercury. Despite meager attempts, remediation has never been adequately addressed. Today, chemicals are still being dumped into the water, further exacerbating the mercury in the ecosystem. Despite the promise by the federal Liberals to address clean water across the country, Grassy Narrows remains on a boil water advisory today, with research showing a link between poisoning and high youth suicide rates. How do you think a First Nation community like Grassy Narrows is impacted when their elders die early due to mercury poisoning and their youth die by suicide due to mercury poisoning? And what are the government's plans to not only prevent these tragedies, but also to hold companies accountable for their environmental harms and help the people of Grassy today? Thank you.
No, thank you. We knew, taking office in 2015, that boil water advisories in Indigenous communities was one of the great challenges we had to take on as a country. It was emblematic of the broken relationship between Indigenous peoples and the Government of Canada for decades and indeed centuries, and it was something that we had to actually fix. We have moved forward significantly on that. We'll get to Grassy Narrows in a moment, but we had 109 long-term boil water advisories in place when we took office in 2015. We have now lifted about 145 of them. We have prevented about 200 short-term boil water advisories from becoming long-term boil water advisories, and there are now only about 35 or 40 communities across the country that still have, Indigenous communities that have boil water advisories. That's 35 or 40 too many still, but every single one of them has a plan, a project manager, and the funding associated to end them. So we are going to end all those boil water advisories right across the country in Indigenous communities. Around Grassy Narrows, it's a particularly egregious and challenging situation that is heartbreaking. Speaking with kids and elders from there, hearing their stories is just gut-wrenching. That's why the federal government is working with the community and will continue to work with the community to clean, to protect, and to move forward. It is not an easy situation, as everyone can imagine, but it is something that we are continuing to work on, and we will continue to be there. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, we're probably going to have only time for 2 more questions, I'm thinking. I'll go to mic number 2.
Thank you. Tansei, hello, Mr. Prime Minister. The question is in relation to the one you just heard. First, I'd like to acknowledge what a privilege it is that I get to speak with you today. I am Tony Head, a city councillor from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. That is a job the residents of Prince Albert selected me for the past 4 years, a job I humbly accepted, and I hope I get entrusted with it again. But here, with you, I want to address something more close to my heart, something that is a part of my heart. I want to say I'm a proud Indigenous man and a member of Lac La Ronge Indian Band. I arrived here in this beautiful city on the eve of a terrifying water main break. I was happy to see the quick and comprehensive response, but it also brought me much sadness. I was reminded of my friends living on reserves in Saskatchewan, my family in Manitoba, who can't turn on their taps and pour themselves a glass of water, ever. I know adults who have never been able to pour themselves a glass of water from the tap in their own home. Here in Calgary and in my home in Prince Albert and in many non-Indigenous communities in Canada, really, having clean water in every kitchen and bathroom is considered necessary. In very many Indigenous communities, for very many of my friends and family, it's nothing short of a luxury. My question to you is this: why is this okay? In this beautiful, wealthy, developed, free country, why is it okay for my people to go without water? And I know that work is being done, but I also know that it's being done at the speed of molasses. It's not considered an emergency, not like the water main break in here in Calgary.
Tansei, thank you. Thank you for that. Like I said, it's not acceptable. And that is why we made the commitment to end the boil water advisories and why we have ended so many of them and why we are going to be ending all of them. It is an issue that has many different aspects to it that we're dealing with entirely. You can't just plonk down a new water treatment plant. It involves training up people so the local community can actually continue to run it. It means ongoing investments. It means a sustainable long-term future. And these are the investments we're making to lift boil water advisories and keep them lifted for decades to come. It's not going as fast as anyone would like, but it is unacceptable. And I thank you for bringing that forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we try to squeeze 2 questions and you can answer them together at the end? Is that okay? So we'll do number 1 and number 2 back to back, and then we'll have the Prime Minister respond. Number 1.
Sure. I will make my preamble short. First of all, I'm going to make it long. Prime Minister, I've been elected for 14 years and you have showed up at FCM every year I've been here, and I appreciate that. You care about municipalities. So I'm an Albertan. I'm in the mayor in Alberta, City of St. Albert, and I've heard my premier talk about Bill 18, which is a problem between the federal government and the provincial government, and she says we need to be at the table. I heard your minister, Sean Fraser, this morning talk about the table. My simple question for you is, can you put a tablecloth on the table, put knives and forks and wine glasses, and get your ministry? We need a federal ministry of municipal affairs, for one. But we need every provincial minister of municipal affairs, and we need the presidents of associations, which I'm a past president, at the table. I'm asking you, it's June 7th. I want on June 8th an invite to the table. That's simple. Get it done.
Thank you very much. We'll go to number 2, and then the Prime Minister will respond to both.
Honorable Prime Minister, thank you for being here. My name is Jimmy Hassan. I'm from Kingston City Councillor. My question is different than my colleagues have been asking it. With many other problems, the Ontarian and the Canadian are suffering with shortage of family health physicians. In my city only, 28,000 people, seniors, children, women, has no doctor. And we are not near to even think that we're going to have a doctor soon and we're going to deal with this issue as a municipality. Knowing this is not a municipality issue, it's not a federal issue. But I'm urging you as a proud Canadian and proud Kingstonian that if you can step up and start a blue ribbon program, hire the doctor from other countries, train them and give it to the province and force them to take it so you can serve these Canadians who need that health services, who gave the life to work for this country. Now they're looking at you and your government to provide them the health services. I will appreciate that if you can step up, being our Prime Minister, and help us to take us out of this problem as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with that one. We absolutely agree. Access to primary care, access to physicians is fundamentally important. It's the gateway into the healthcare system. If you can't see a primary doctor, you can't then see a specialist. People showing up in emergency rooms, which is more expensive and less efficient. People need primary care doctors. That is why that was a core element of the $200 billion worth of investments that we announced last year in agreements with the provinces over the next 10 years. There are key metrics that have to be hit have to be shared in terms of how many Canadians have access to primary care physicians. And we're going to see results on that because the provinces are going to be held to that by citizens and municipal leaders and journalists and academics and ordinary Canadians who are frustrated that they can't access family doctors. Yes, on accelerated accreditation, there are things that the federal government can do and is doing to make sure we're bringing in more doctors, but ultimately it is to the provincial bodies to actually approve the accreditation in their medical health systems. We're putting pressures on the provinces, but the more all of us can put pressures on the provinces to get more primary health care physicians in our system, the better off we're all going to be. We need to see those results. Federal government is going to show up and keep putting pressure on it, but we need the provinces to continue to deliver the right kind of health care for Canadians. The question on the table is a really, really fundamental one. And you are all of a really important order of government, and you understand the things you can do and the things you can't. As a local MP for Papineau, I used to smile whenever someone complained that the garbage trucks were too loud and there wasn't enough pickup in their week. And instead of explaining, well, I'm federal and I can't deal that, I'd say, I appreciate that request. Let me accompany you or make sure my office helps you get an appointment with the municipal office so they can follow up and then we make sure that they actually got that appointment to get things done. You all know how easy and tempting it is to sort of shrug things off and say, oh, well, no, that's another order of government's responsibility. I can't help you on that. But yeah, we really should try and push that other order of government together. We all have to work together. We all are serving the same citizens across. We have different tools to do that, but we serve the same citizens. And Municipalities are creations and responsibilities according to our Constitution of the provinces. The federal government has, in times past, certainly was what I heard about when I showed up here as leader of the third party in the House, newly selected Liberal leader here. I heard how it was harmful on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and all of you that we had a federal government back in 2013 that didn't engage constructively with the provinces, or sorry, with the municipalities. It didn't engage that constructively with the provinces either, but that's another thing. Having a federal government that doesn't want to step up and invest and work with directly municipalities was one of the big things I promised to turn around back in 2013 in my first meeting with you. And I think I've demonstrated, at least by showing up and engaging, which is more than could be said for the Conservative leader who is conspicuous in his absence from last year and this year. Maybe he'll show up next year. We'll see. But I hope you ask him the same types of questions that you're asking me, because we have to have conversations about how the federal government will continue to step up to be there for municipalities, and how the federal government will ensure that pressure continues to be put on provinces to step up in their responsibilities towards municipalities. One of the things that I have seen over the past years is because the federal government has been stepping up for municipalities, provincial governments have been stepping back. They've been saying things like, okay, we're going to invest in this wastewater, but only if the federal government comes in on half. Or we're going to help out with operational funding on some of the public transit usage, but the federal government has to come in on operational funding as well. Well, the federal government isn't in the business of providing operation. We did during the pandemic for a number of things because that was an emergency. But there has been a shift and an absconding of responsibility from the provinces to actually be supporting you the way they need to. And the fact that the federal government has been stepping up in significant ways over the past 9 years is something that not only can't be taken for granted, but shouldn't be used as an excuse for the provinces to step back. Certainly not as an excuse for the provinces to then say, we have to legislate so the federal government never spends on municipalities again. That's ridiculous. So I am absolutely open to convening meetings between the provincial premiers and municipal leaders from across the country so the federal government can be there to talk about how we're going to understand that the Canadian Constitution and the way we run things has changed from being 80% rural and 20% urban 150 years ago to being 80% urban and 20% rural in terms of our population across the country now. And that requires new ways of funding the towns, cities across the country that support the vast majority of Canadians. There is something that we need to fix, and we need to fix it together. So I am happy to look at ways where we can convene both the provinces and municipalities to talk about how we're going to create a new growth framework. But the solution isn't for the federal government to just give more money if it's not going to be the provinces also finally stepping up to be there as true partners for municipalities right across the country. And that's what we're going to work on together. So thank you very much for your question. Thank you for bringing that forward.
Prime Minister, thank you very much for being here at FCM year after year at our annual AGM. Thank you for taking questions directly from municipal leaders across the country. We're sorry we couldn't get to everybody, but the conversations will continue, and we appreciate you being here. And I'm going to hand it back to the dynamic Catherine, I think our host, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Thank you very much.
Now, after the speech, we caught up with Cathy, Heron, Mayor of St. Albert, to ask her about her thoughts on the Prime Minister's answer to her question. Mayor Heron, you just asked the last question to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau about federal government inviting people to the table?
Setting the table, yep.
Did you get the answer you were
No,
looking for?
I did not get the table. So what I had asked them is, honestly, I would like an invite tomorrow to every premier, every minister in municipal affairs. They have different titles in every province, and maybe every president of every municipal association. Because everybody wants everybody at the table, but nobody sets the table. And he's my prime minister. He needs to be the leader, and he needs to set the table. I think he's open to and willing, but I don't really think he understood what I was asking. So he wants, Sean Fraser said it, well, I want to be at the table, municipalities. Where is the table?
So the question then has to be asked, have you asked the Premier this question?
Well, no. Quite honestly, I mean, it's probably a difficult thing to say in Alberta, but I really appreciate Trudeau because he took questions from the floor. The Premier does too. But she talked about in Bill 18 in the press release about we need everyone at the table. Unfortunately, Bill 18 shuts the door to the room where the table is. It's not going to set the table. Hers is anti-collaboration. But she did say it. And so I'm hearing her say it. I'm hearing federal government saying it. And then you got all these municipalities in the room waiting. Janine Rudick joked about it today. Send me a calendar invite. I'll be there. That's all we need. That's really what we need right now.
What does this collaboration not happening mean for a city like St. Albert?
So in St. Albert, I've got a conservative MP with little influence. And so I hoped in my role as Alberta Municipalities President and maybe running for directorship of FCM to find my wedge, my wiggle into that table and that conversation. But as long as Alberta, especially Alberta, has very heavily conservative MPs with a Liberal government, we're left out. Who knows if it changes in 18 to 24 months? It might change. But I would like the next government, Liberal or Conservative, to be open to understanding that there is an order of government in Canada, closest to the people, that is struggling, that is completely cooperative, consensus building, non-partisan, for the most part, for the time being.
Until the next election.
For the time being. And then we just are, we don't care. We don't care who is in charge and in government. We just want, and we're not asking for money. We're honestly not asking for money. We're asking for understanding of when you develop grant programs might not work for community A and community B. And when the federal government puts conditions that are blanket across the country, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So that conversation, I've been elected for 14 years, has not happened. Ever.
Do you think it could happen?
I do.
Tyler Gandam, president of Alberta Municipalities, was also in attendance and was prepared to ask the Prime Minister a question if time allowed. We just wrapped up the Prime Minister's speech here at FCM in Calgary. Did you hear anything optimistic, hopeful about relationship building between the municipalities and the federal government, or even between all three levels of government? And what was your takeaway from his speech?
I think that it's been pretty obvious that there are some strained relationships between some provinces and the federal government. I don't think that municipalities share that. Maybe they do. I'm not sure that all municipalities share that same kind of discontent with the federal government. At the end of the day, we all represent the same people that voted, whether you're municipal, provincial, or federal. Really doesn't matter. We're representing the same people. So I think it's important that the federal government also hears municipal concerns. There are definitely opportunities for the federal government to help municipalities, especially on issues that are at the federal level. We're not looking for them to step out of their lane or come into a municipality and be the white knight to save us. But we definitely need that relationship moving forward. And whether or not that includes the province, I don't think is relevant to how a municipality is going to operate and making sure that we build those relationships moving forward. What Bill 18 does for agreements with the federal government, is yet to be seen. Again, we're hoping to work with them on regulations, making sure that a majority of the agreements or the grants that municipalities have with the federal government will continue without any interference from the province. It's vitally important that we don't have another layer of having to apply for a grant through the province, making sure that it fits the provincial priorities of the province that hasn't been clearly identified as what will or won't be passed along to the federal government. And we still need to have that opportunity to make our cases with the federal government. We've had, in Wetaskiwin alone, we had applied for a grant through the province for the ISIP funding for our wastewater treatment facility. We had applied for it twice, and neither time did the province pass that along to the federal government. So I've seen firsthand the impact of having to go through the province to get federal funding and how it's going to hold back potential funding coming back to municipalities. So I'm really hoping that we don't have to deal with that moving forward. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to build relationships with all orders of government. We do it between municipalities. We want to do it with the province. And of course, we will continue to ask for that opportunity with the federal government.
So you were in line, but there was not enough time for you to ask your question. So I've got to ask, what were you going to ask the Prime Minister?
I was going to ask, what is the impact to municipalities having to go through the province to get agreements signed or to apply for grant funding?
Perfect. What were you hoping to hear from?
I'm not sure. They do it in Quebec, and I've heard from Quebec municipalities some of the hurdles that they have with it, the amount of staff that it takes to also vet some of those requests. So I'm wondering, firsthand experience of the Prime Minister working with a province that a municipality has to go through their provincial government before they're able to essentially talk to the federal government. So wanting to hear what his experience is, and if he had some advice for us on how we can streamline some of that.
Now, before we let you go, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for allowing us to attend this year's convention here in beautiful Calgary, Alberta. This episode would not have been possible without their support. Now, if today's episode sparked your interest, hit that subscribe button now, wherever you're watching this or listening to this. Stay in the loop with all our diverse content covering everything from municipal affairs from coast to coast to coast. We are your go-to platform for comprehensive municipal coverage committed to keeping you well informed as well as engaged. But your support is the backbone of our growth and the maintenance of this top-notch content you have come to enjoy. If you can, consider backing the show. Every contribution, big or small, amplifies the depth and the breadth of our programming. Find the support page link on the Cross Border Interviews website today. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, just keep talking.